You
All
Dre
don't
right,
said,
know.
boom.
ooh.
So we
Dre
back.
said,
He,
ooh.
Yeah, yeah. Look, we back at y'all live with another episode of the White History series. So for this episode, we about to get into Uzbekistan, and we're just gonna just touch on just some key points of they history from kind of the beginnings to close to modern history. I'm just gonna keep it, you know, somewhat short, as short as I can. But let's hop into this shit. So Uzbekistan. It says the first people known to have inhabited Central Asia were Scythians who came from the northern grasslands of what's now Uzbekistan, sometime in the first millennium BC.
Before Christ, damn.
Mm-hmm. So by the 5th century, Bactrian, Sogdian, and Tocharian states dominated the region. And then it also goes on to say that as East Asia began to develop its silk trade with the West, then basically the different like little cities and settlements within this region, specifically in the province of Transoxiana, started to kind of flourish. And then it's basically saying that the people in Sogdia specifically, they became the wealthiest of merchants.
I think the minute we heard slave trade, we should have known taxes were coming down the line. I mean, not slave trade, Silk Road.
So yeah, that's the Silk Road. So
Fucking
boom,
trade, that trade route.
exactly. Y'all heard about it from school, but y'all just didn't know who was on the goddamn route. So that's what we get into.
That was that was the first Walmart.
So next joint they talking about, as a result of the trade on what would become known as the Silk Route, Bukhara and Samarkand eventually became extremely wealthy cities, and at times Transoxiana, I guess also known as Mawa Rana Har, were one of the most influential and powerful provinces in antiquity. Um, so then it goes on. In 327 BC, Macedonian ruler Alexander the Great conquered the Persian Empire provinces of Sogdiana and Bactria, which contained territories of modern Uzbekistan. So now you got some little key figures. Everybody didn't heard of Alexander the Great. I'm gonna assume, but we'll eventually get to his ass down the line as well.
Yeah, using the school curriculum.
Hmm. So let's fast forward. Basically, resistance to the conquest was fierce, causing Alexander's army to be bogged down in the region that became the northern part of the Macedonian Greco-Bactrian kingdom. So, further on, let's talk about the kingdom was replaced with the UZ dominated Kushan Empire in the first century BC. So, like I was breaking down in part one of the series, the UZ are the Caucasians. You know what I mean? Period. And this is as spelled out by the ancient Chinese. They were like those are they called them Western barbarians. So now when you hear that saying, I want you to think Conan the Barbarian. Like they spelling it out for you. But anyway, eventually this region was ruled by the Kushan Empire, then later on down the line by the Parthian Empire, and then later on down the line by the Sassanid Empire. And then after them, the Turkic Gok Turk peoples, who in the previous installment of the series we talked about the Turks, how they were basically kind of like Asian. They were more like a mulatto mix of Caucasian and Asians, even though collectively it might be more full blood Asians within the overall group, but a lot of them were, mulattoes, basically a mixture of the Asian and Caucasian. So anyway, it goes on. The Muslim conquest from the 7th century onwards saw the Arabs bring Islam to Uzbekistan. So in the 8th century, it says Transoxiana, the territory between Amudarya and the Sidaria rivers, was conquered by the Arabs, becoming a focal point soon after the Islamic Golden Age. In the 9th and 10th centuries, Transoxiana was brought into the Samanid state. Later, it saw the incursion of the Turkic ruled Karakhanids, as well as the Seljuks, Sultan Sanjar, and the Kara-Khitans. The Mongol Conquest under Genghis Khan during the 13th century brought change to the region. And I'm sure all of y'all, once again, I'm just going to throw it out there. Hopefully you've heard of Genghis Khan. If you haven't, we'll go more in depth into him somewhere down the line, because he's playing a part in all of these different cultures, especially in the 12th century. He put his stamp on a third of the known world population at that time. So maybe a third of a
Apparently, like
fourth.
five.
Yeah.
Apparently, 5% of people descended from that type of Asian Mongolian line on the planet are just direct descendants of Genghis Khan. That's how many people he impregnated during that
Yeah,
time.
yeah. Rape and pillage, you know what I mean? Them niggas was the
Yeah.
those were the original gangsters. So basically, following his death, his empire was divided among his 4 sons and family members, and they held on to it for like a little minute, but eventually, all things come to an end. So the next slide here is basically breaking down after the decline of the Golden Horde. Khwarezm was briefly ruled by the Sufi dynasty until Timur's conquest in 1388. And Timur is another cat that you are. Well, oh, okay, they talk about him in a couple of bullet points down. So it looks like the long and short, these other cats came in after, Genghis Khan little thing died down and the wave ended. And then the Persians kind of came back in there to conquer the territory again. And then one of these tribal chiefs, this guy Tamor, also known as Tamerlane, emerged from these struggles in the 1380s as the dominant force in Transoxiana. And even though he wasn't related to Genghis Khan, I guess he put that same type of gangster move down. And then it's said that he proceeded to conquer all of Western Central Asia, Iran, basically the Caucasus Mountain region, Mesopotamia, Asia Minor, and the southern steppe region of the north of the Aral Sea. He also invaded Russia before dying during an invasion of China in 1405. Timur was also known for his extreme brutality, and his conquests were accompanied by genocidal massacres in the cities he occupied. So yeah, these boys was definitely not playing no games at all. Let me see what's going on over here. Okay, all right. So anyway, back to this. So it says that Timur initiated the last flowering of Transoxiana by gathering together numerous artisans and scholars from the vast lands he had conquered in his capital, Samarkand, thus imbuing his empire with a rich Perso-Islamic culture. So, moving on. Dude also initiated an exchange of medical discoveries and patronized physicians, scientists, and artists from neighboring regions such as India. His grandson, I guess Ulu or Ulug Beg was one of the world's first great astronomers. And then during his dynasty, the Turkic, in the form of the Chagatai dialect, became a literary language in its own right. Even though collectively the people in that Timurid Empire were passionate, or they were Persianate in culture. So they were Turkic, but I guess they was kind of more embracing of the Persian culture at that time. So just some final little tidbits. The Timurid state split in half after the death of Timur. Chronic internal fighting attracted the attention of the Uzbek nomadic tribes from the north. In 1501, Uzbek forces began a wholesale invasion of Transoxiana. The slave trade in the Emirate of Bukhara became prominent and was firmly established at this time. So, just to stay right there for a minute. In this region, Central Asia, you only had Caucasians primarily and Asians who was being enslaved. This is where everybody was a slave, but they don't talk about who was the slaves, you feel me? But anyway, before the arrival of the Russians, present-day Uzbekistan was divided between the Emirate of Bukhara and the Khanates of Khiva and Kokand. And then finally, coming closer to modern times, in the 19th century, the Russian Empire began to expand and spread into Central Asia. And then in 1917, you had the Bolshevik Revolution. Around that time, it looked like Russia started to, I guess, have more of a impact in their region. And then by 1920, Central Asia was firmly in the hands of Russia, despite early resistance to the Bolsheviks. And then it goes on, Uzbekistan and the rest of Central Asia became part of the Soviet Union. So on October 1924, the Uzbek Soviet Socialist Republic was created. And pretty much the last little pieces here. During World War II, they fought in the Red Army against the Nazi Germany. And we'll kind of leave it off there for the country that we call Uzbekistan. And that will conclude this little episode. So I appreciate y'all, and I'll holler at y'all later.